Good. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to start. This is the Sausage Sports Club weekly update. I do this every week for 4 reasons. One, I think it's useful for students and new developers to see how a commercial game is made, and it's a resource I feel like I missed out on and would have loved to have as I was learning, and I'm still learning now. I still think seeing other people do this kind of thing would be cool, but okay. Second reason is obviously like marketing. Like, it's good to talk about the game as much as you can, and if I do that every week, then more people are likely to hear about it. I'm looking for a hairband, but I don't have one on my desk. Third reason is like selfish. In 5 or 10 years or whatever, it'll be cool to look back on this and be able to see how I made the game and stuff like that. So, and then the fourth reason is people come into the chat sometimes and tell me a way to do a thing I'm working on better, and that's often really useful and like makes my workflow better. So I appreciate that. Yeah. So this week I did a bunch of bug fixing and stuff, and I want to run through this list just to kind of show like what that looks like and like how much minutia there really is involved in that. Usually I like go pretty deep into each topic and like talk a lot about it, but since there's so many here, I want to try to like cover them briefly. We'll see if I can do that. Before I do that, I'm gonna grab some water just so I don't get super dehydrated, so I'll be right back. Okay, cool. So first, I guess I'll do a high level thing because not like the vast majority of my time this week is spent doing bug fix stuff, but some of the other stuff is interesting. First is this like scary save data issue that I'll talk more about. That was kind of like an interesting learning lesson for me, where I hadn't been thinking about save data size at all, and it kind of came up at the last minute, I guess. So I'll talk about that. Lots of bug fixes, obviously. Bryce, who's doing QA, who does all of the QA on the game, tests it and like makes cards for me to fix and stuff, is having an issue making Switch builds right now, so we've been spending a little bit of time trying to figure that out. As of yesterday, and this like probably will not be true by the end of today when I notice more issues on Switch, but I had fixed all of the issues that were only on Switch. There are tons of issues left in the game still, but things that were only on Switch, like input related, or most of them were probably input related, or like me using APIs wrong or something that was causing errors. Like all that stuff is fixed, so all of the Switch features are like in and working well, so that's cool. The other high level thing is I'm prepping to do another submission to LotCheck, which is like cert, on Tuesday, and hopefully that one will go through, and then I can do another day one patch before the game comes out. We'll see what happens, or not a day one patch necessarily, but a patch at least before the game comes out, because there's still some things that I would want to do before I ship, even if the Tuesday build made it. Like the thing that I want most is to optimize the overworld more, especially in adventure mode when there are a lot of NPCs kind of placed all over the place. Frame rate can get down pretty low, and I feel like it's a solvable issue. I just need to like spend more time on it. So that's a thing. Okay. So let's talk about the save data issue. Basically, Nintendo reported this bug. I got it back that if you make 6 names on device and then like go through the rest of the player select, where you do this, at the end of player select, I save the game to make sure that players' names that they've spent time making get saved for sure. And If you do more than 6, the game would just crash in release mode, which means that an error happened. Or in this case, it was presumably like some internal switch thing where it was checking like how big is, and I'll explain more about this, but basically it was checking how big are we allowed to make a save file, and then like if it's, you know, if we're trying to save a file out that's bigger than the max size, then error out or quit or whatever, you know, whatever internally is happening. And I learned over time, like, I mean, in debugging this issue, I realized like my save data for each player is pretty big, and my max save data size, what it was set to previously, was pretty small. So it only took 6 player names, and it's not just a string, and I'll explain that more. But each player name was a lot of memory, like 10,000 bytes, which isn't like grand scale, that's not a lot, but if your max save data size is only set to be 60,000 bytes, that's, you know, that's pretty small. So a little bit of context, in Sausage Sports Club, there's one save data for the entire game, and that's like, you know, that's the file that gets saved out. And within that, there's like the game save, and then there's player saves. A player save isn't associated with like a user account or anything. It's just the name that you enter in player select. So if you play alone and you don't ever change your name, all of your save data for your player will just be like associated with player 1 as your as the save file. And if you, at some point, if you play for 10 hours and then make a new save name, so if I'm like, if 10 hours of playing, I discover, oh, I can do this, and I change my name to be Wad or whatever, that's what I usually do, then all of the save data of that name that you're starting as, like player 1 in this case, if you go to make a new one, it would copy player 1's data into Wad. So that was like, I spent a while kind of considering like what the structure of saves should be, like not in data, like a representation in code, but like from a design standpoint, like how do I make sure players don't lose their progress if they want to change their name? How do I let people be as free as they want? And that was kind of the conclusion I came to. It's still a little bit weird. Like there's a weird use case of if I play a lot and then I have a friend come over and they've never played and nobody's played on player 2 or whatever, there's no like servicing of that system of like, if I make a new player save as player 1, then it will copy my data into Wad or whatever. There's no way for the user to know that intuitively. So if I want to like get my friend who comes over, I want to start them with a bunch of hats, which is a lot of what the player save data holds. There's not really a way for me to know intuitively that I could do that by making a new name, switching my name back to player 1, and then telling them to select Wad or whatever to get all the hats that I unlocked. And that, I think that's okay. Like you wouldn't expect your friend to come over and for them to like automatically get all of the hats that you have. And that is a structure that the game could have had. Like I could make it so everybody shares hats, but I think it's more interesting for everybody to have their own unique hats, and to like the moment that I like with this system is 2 players go into the hat shop. Player 1 gets a hat. Player 2's like, oh, that's so cool, I wonder what I'll get, and then they get a hat and they're like, oh, that's different, like my hat's different from yours, but it's also cool. And there, of course, there's like jealousy of like, oh, they got a hat that I want and they don't even like it, oh, that sucks. But it's I think that encourages you to keep playing so that you can get that hat too. And this is kind of like getting away from the topic at hand, but I feel like that context is kind of useful. So anyway, getting back into this idea, that's like the player specific save. In the game save, there's like stats about the whole game, like how far in adventure mode are you, how many characters and skins and arenas do you have unlocked, that kind of stuff is the game save versus the player save, which is like minute data. And I have it written here. That has the hats that you've unlocked, the hats that you've worn. The reason I track that is because in the player, like the hat select widget that pops up, I show a little star for ones that are new, so you get the little like tick of dopamine when you like open that and go through and like make sure that you've checked out every single hat. So I have to save which ones you've worn. I save the last hat so that when you start playing again, you automatically have the hat that you had in your previous play session. I save stats, which is just like an enum. Game states. It's just like a bunch of stuff. I'm not really doing that much with this yet. I think the only one I'm using right now are like these two to get your win ratio or whatever. But conceivably, like this could be in a menu somewhere, or I've talked about this on stream before, but a stretch goal I have that I'll probably add as like a free update or something is to do hat challenges where each hat that you get has an associated challenge that once you beat that challenge, and it would probably just be like jump 100 times, and once you beat that challenge, you get the golden version of that hat. But I define for each hat like the what's a good example? Like let's say the Halo, play 5 matches without kicking anybody. Like that's a challenge for the Halo, and that's kind of a contrived example, but you could vaguely associate like a stat related challenge with the concept of what the hat is. So I think that would be fun, and so that's like what I might use stats for. I'm not looking at code right now. So we have stats, and there's also input rebinding. That's the other reason that player save is a useful paradigm for me, is in the settings menu, when you rebind all of your save, when you rebind your inputs, like what button is to jump, what button is to pause, what button is to kick, all that stuff gets saved per player. So if I have a friend who like plays with weird controls for some reason, or I play with weird controls but nobody else I know does, and I want to like keep those settings saved so that every time I start I don't have to like rebind my shit. I'll just save it to my name, and then that's like when I start playing, it's just going to have my defaults for me. So with all of this stuff, with 60 hats, potentially 60 worn hats, my last hat, my lifetime stats, which is you know, maybe 100, and then input rebindings, which is like 20 maybe. Somehow all of this data, which isn't that much data, was making up 10,000 bytes, and that, like I said, that was, it only took 6 of those to get up to the limit of my save data at that time, and that was like stupid. Like if I have this like player name system and I want players to like have fun and make each other laugh and like make up new names, it should be, if not unlimited, then basically unlimited. Like for the purpose of its use, you know, 500 names is like as far as anybody might go. You don't need that many. You probably won't ever get over 100. So it's basically unlimited. And anyway, it was at 10,000 bytes. That felt like a lot to me, and the save data size was at 64,000 bytes, which seemed very low to me. And in trying to change this value, I would go to the I don't really want to show on stream like those settings, but one of them is like the save data size, and you can change it, and you'd see that reflected in that page. But when I would leave that page and come back, it would be reset, like reverted to what it was before, and that was like weird, and I didn't understand why. So I tried just like doubling it, tripling it, whatever, and none of that worked. And I couldn't figure out why, so I thought it was just like hard limit. That's what it was. Maybe like in the most recent SDK, they like hard locked it to that number. So I decided, okay, that sucks, but I'm gonna have to cope with this, and like maybe I'll have to make some limit in the system of like how many names you can make. So but first let's see how low I can get these numbers. So I went through, and in the player save, this is the newer version, not the old version. So I've got these lists, and here's another one, and then there's the last one, hat. Here's a dictionary, another dictionary. You can see these are all int typed lists and dictionaries, like int to int, and then this one's a hat type, or enum, but these are all ints. And I figured intuitively that was going to be like a smaller thing. Like I think this is an int is just assigned int, and then an enum, yeah, an int that's only 4 bytes, and then I don't know how big an enum is, but when I tried this, basically, that's the answer. Is when I tried this, like that made it smaller. Just changing this stuff to an int, dictionary of int was smaller. The other thing I did was I manually set the size, the capacity here. Like when you declare a list or whatever, I generally just leave this blank because it's not relevant. Like memory in my game generally is not like a bottleneck, or so I thought. And I mean, certainly on the code side, it's not really an issue. But I would just leave that blank, and that I don't know what the default size that a list creates as a capacity, but it's bigger than 5, so it just allocates like more. It just allocates more memory than like defining it yourself. Apparently, you can also do this with a dictionary. I didn't realize that. So this one I was able to set exactly for like how many I have, because this one's never going to change in size. It's just like this one's the static one, but this copies it on the first initialization. So those things, just this change, like just changing the ints and just like setting the capacity manually to what I expect it to be, got me down from like 10k bytes for a default thing. I think it was like 9,600 bytes or something like that. Got it all the way down to like 5,000 by default. And so the obvious thing here, like when I change this capacity to 5, as soon as I add 2 hats to this, like I unlock 2 hats, this is gonna grow, and that's gonna incur like runtime cost of resizing this list, but that's totally fine. And it's also going to increase the size of the data when I save again, but that's totally fine too, because every time I write a save file, I just delete the file and then write it again. And if I can hold 500 empty names, and like maybe 5 or 10 of those have some data, have like half the hats unlocked or something, that's not that much more, and it's only like, you know, 5 or 10 out of the 500. So it's really rare that you would have all of the names in the list have a lot of data in it, unless somebody like beat the game pretty much, got every hat, got filled out their stat thing, rebound all their controls. Like unless you did that and then, you know, manually went through and like made 500 different names, which is a tedious process. Like every time you make a new name, it takes like slightly longer to get to the letters that you want to make another name, if that makes sense. Like if I start at AAA and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make 500 names, I have to, you know, I have to do AAA, AAB, AAC, or ABA, ACA. So it just like, if you're trying to fuck up the system in that way, even, it still takes a long time because every one puts you farther away from making a new name. So it's, I don't know how long it would take, but longer than would seem reasonable. And I'll probably end up like somebody on Switch will end up fucking up their save data and then writing an email or tweeting at me or whatever and being like, hey, I broke my save data, like I lost all my progress, like fuck you. And then I'll be like, okay, why did you make 500 names? That'll be my first thought, but then I'll fix it. And the reason I'm not gonna fix it until that happens is because it's like, it creates design, UX, and programming problems for me to do that, and so I just don't want to because it's a non-issue. Okay, so like I made all these changes, got the size down, and then realized, looking at the like developer forums or whatever for Switch, that you can actually increase the save data file or the save data max size or whatever, like a lot from what I had. And the limit on it is that it has to be a multiple of 16,000 bytes or something like that. And so that was the part that I wasn't getting, and that's why when I tried to change that number, it didn't do what I expected it to do. So then I like did the math of like, okay, what's 500 was the number I wanted. So like, how many do I need to? How big does my save file need to be so that I can do 500 player names? And then I made it that big, and so that was 200 and something thousand bytes. Not really sure off the top of my head, but that was kind of a scary and interesting problem. Like, it's not. I had not, like, at no point in development had I ever been like, huh, is this save file going to be too big? Even if I have unlimited, like it just never came up. Because at one point I did do the math on the back of a napkin or whatever of like, how big do I think each of these data types is? Like, what does that add up to if I know how many hats there are, how many stats, how many rebind stuff? And it was, I probably got close to the 10,000 bytes thing. I was like, it doesn't really matter. Like, that's not a big number. But so now that's out of the way. Okay. I see there's a bunch of people that are viewers but not chatting. Hi guys. Well, welcome. Glad to see you around. Okay, let me go through bugs because there's a lot, and then I'm gonna do the work session and fix more bugs. And I want to not get too deep into these. I know I have the tendency to like go off on a tangent, like explaining what's going on, but unless it really requires like explanation, I'll try not to. So bugs, localization was a big one. There's just like a ton of like weird small issues that I didn't expect to have happen. Things like having the wrong font pop up if you're in Japanese versus English. If your term is like the wrong case, then it's going to show up as the wrong case in the thing, and that's weird. Like I think there's still a bug now where the interact widget, when you like walk up to a building and it says like enter this building, that's capitalized, but if I go to like a hat card, I think that says change hats, and it's like camel case, only the first letter is capitalized. So that's kind of a bug that I'm still figuring out. And there's a bunch like this multiplied over the entire game where there's like maybe like 20 UI panels, not even just labels, but like panels which each have within them like dozens of labels. There's just a lot of room for stuff to be fucked up. There's probably like 3 or 400 labels. What's up, Chris? Okay, next one. In the jungle, there was this issue in light maps where if any tree was overshadowed, which means here's the tree, here's a tree above it that's shadowing it, and then here's another thing above it that's shadowing it. So the bottom one is like double shadowed, basically. I call it overshadow. In that specific case, specifically for the trees in the jungle, instead of like 2 trees on top of it, making it be the same amount of dark as like one shadow would be, because that's how shadows work. Like if I put my hand above my hat, which is already shadowing my face doesn't get any darker. Instead of doing that, it was just making the tree go to black in that spot, and that was a weird problem that existed for a while that I didn't understand. And eventually, I just from trying out light map settings in like a test scene with not much stuff, I didn't learn why that happens, but I did learn that the solution is to use the final gather setting in the light map window. Somewhere, final gather right here. And I just set this to 16, so it's not like that much longer of a light map bake, but it is a little bit longer. So I actually have this, I have a laptop off screen over here that did a light map bake and like I've made some changes in the overworld, and like those are on that computer. So maybe once I finish my list of bugs, I'll like push that so I can be in the new light map bake on this computer. Okay, so increases saturation, contrast, color grading. I got feedback from one of the playtesters that specifically in the overworld, the world is like not as colorful as they would like, and some textures seem like a little bit desaturated and stuff. And I was like, you know what? That's right. I'm really used to all these colors and stuff, but really the game is colorful, cartoony, supposed to evoke Nintendo feelings or like childhood cartoon kind of like memories or whatever. So I want it to be very colorful, so I turn that stuff up. I guess that's not exactly a bug. Not all of these are bugs, but these are all like little fixes. The point of me sharing this again is there's a lot of minutia that I'm noticing pop up at the end that is just like a pile of hundreds of things that I never ever in my life would have thought of as like, these are things you're gonna need to do at the end, and there's hundreds more. So so I had to change all of the audio settings across every single audio asset, of which there's apparently like 500. And that's sound effects and music and like ambient sound and stuff like that. Tom and Marty did a great job. But now it's my turn to like actually make it run on device. So basically with 500 audio assets, getting it to like fit on the device and not take up all of the memory of the device, there's like settings you can tweak. I guess I can talk about these a little bit. Yeah, so if you click on an asset, look in the inspector, there's all these settings. The ones that are most interesting for this topic are load type and then compression format. So if it's music, you can stream it from the disk rather than like actually loading it into memory. Like you can stream it from the disk. And I don't want to talk about this stuff in depth because it's not like in my brain and I don't know it as well as I could. So I'm gonna instead link the article that I referenced to make these changes, and I gotta just find it on Twitter. I tweeted this article fucking rules. Yes, okay, I found it. Boom, linking it. So this, I don't even know who made this. I should probably follow them on Twitter. The Knights of Unity. So here's the McButt, yeah, here. So here's the cool part. So if it's streaming, it's like stored on the device's hard drive instead of in memory and just streamed. So it doesn't require RAM, which for the Switch is really important because the Switch only has 2 gigs or something of RAM. And so I need to get that number down. Like I'm very close to the 2 gigs right now. Especially once you've loaded between all the levels and stuff, like I'm not doing a lot of like manually unloading stuff, so that accumulates rather than like going up and down a lot when you switch between levels. Some of it like textures and what else? I don't know. Most of the stuff that's located in a scene gets unloaded, meshes, textures, maybe like prefab references that are like referenced on the scene objects. On components on the scene objects, that stuff gets unloaded. So streaming is cool. Compressed in memory is good for sound effects because you can keep the file size small, and they're like fast to open because they're small files. Yeah, I'm not sure that anything in the game is using decompress on load, just because I don't need it. And then the compression thing that's on Vorbis, like they recommended that I set it to 70%, and that's like generally a recommended value, just because you can't really tell the difference of the sound unless you're like, you know, you're an advanced sound person, which most people playing this game on their TV or like on an airplane with their little device in their hand, is they're not gonna be able to like hear the like 30% compression difference. Okay, let's keep moving. I reduced a lot of the normal maps in size. I noticed that texture memory was like well over a gig, I think. Let's see what it is. Yeah, textures, and this, I don't even think this was in the overworld necessarily. I'm not 100% sure. But textures were like by far the biggest part of my memory. Audio is like not that much. So textures make sense as like the place to reduce size. Welcome to Baker. So what that meant for me was going through, looking at a bunch of materials and thinking like, okay, why are these, what's so big here? What textures like increasing the size of stuff a lot? And what I realized is that a lot of my assets have normal maps on them, but it's either like a very subtle effect, you can't tell at all. A good example of this was in the overworld. There's crates that you can just knock around and jump on and kick and stuff. And looking at them, I literally couldn't tell, even like this close, which is closer than the camera will ever be to this crate. Let me get rid of player sensor. Okay. Looking even this close, which is closer than the camera will ever be, I couldn't tell if I if I took the normal map on or off. And that was like a good sign to me that I don't need that to have a normal map on it. And that was like, at the time, that was the same size. These are the same size, the normal map and the diffuse map. And they're not big, but it's still like, what the fuck? Why am I like, why do I use a normal map that I can't even tell? I think this one also had a normal map that I couldn't tell. Anyway, I went through and reduced the size and removed normal maps, and I got back like 50-ish megabytes of texture memory, which isn't huge, but I don't want to get the game down to 1 gigabyte of memory. I just want it to get down so that it's never above the memory limit of the console, which is 2. So 50 is cool. If I could just get it down like 200 total, that would probably be plenty. I fixed one of the oldest bugs that I have tried 100 times to fix. Sometimes when you're switching between scenes, specifically out of the aquarium or out of Tiny Tokyo, crabs or the like little cabs and buses and stuff from Tiny Tokyo would like stay in the scene and just be like at origin basically in the new scene, and like it used to cause errors, and then I fixed that it was causing errors, but it's still like, why is there a crab in the hat shop? That's not right. I couldn't figure out why, so I just ignored it as much as I could. But recently I finally figured out the issue, and that was that object pooling generally is supposed to manage crabs and vehicles, so that at the end of a scene when you unload, I use an object pooling system where I can call object pool recycle all, and it'll go through its list of basically managed object pooled objects and recycle all of them, which means it, you know, turns off their game object, puts it at origin or whatever, and just like leaves it off until it's needed again. And the issue here was I use in my scenes, I have a component called scene pool, which is a list of all of the things that need to be pooled in that scene that aren't in like the global pooling list or whatever. So like in the aquarium, that contains crabs and maybe other stuff. Data scene pools. Okay, so it's just crabs, and it's some number of crabs. But what I realized the issue is this scene pool thing was happening on start, I think. Yeah, so it's still happening on start, but in the same scene, the crabs on start, I spawn a bunch of crabs at the start of the game, and like classic Unity like race condition like script execution race condition, the start of scene pool either wasn't always consistently before crab manager, which would have explained why only sometimes this issue happened, and so all I had to do was move scene pool to happen in the script execution order list, if you're familiar with that. Fucking project settings, this guy. This is just like a list of anything that, how do I explain it? Like default time is by default, all of the scripts are like kind of not randomly, but I don't know what the order they decide is, but all of them happen here. And you can say this script happens before the default like time that scripts happen. And I use this a lot for a lot of different stuff to avoid race conditions. But so all I had to do was move scene pool up just one little spot, and that fixed the problem. And that was like a really, for me, that was like a very cathartic moment of like, I can, like, it was like a see the matrix kind of moment where I'm like, oh my God, this issue has existed for 2 years in the game, like, and now I can see exactly why it's wrong, and like how every fix I've made for it ignores the reason that it's wrong. And it was, I was very excited when I fixed that. Okay, I'm gonna run through a few of these. I fixed the layout and a first frame jigger issue in the pause menu. When you would first open it for the first time, there was like one frame where the blur background was just like there, and then it would disappear and be correct, but the first frame was fucked up. The back button no longer quits the app if on the main menu. I was using the same function whether you click the back button with the like cursor selector in the main menu or if you hit the B button, and that's not really appropriate. Like if I hit the B button on the main menu, either you need like a pop-up confirmation thing to be like, do you really want to quit? Or you just shouldn't be able to use the B button to back out again from the main menu. It should really be a confirm if you want to quit. So I changed that. I swapped in outline fonts in a bunch of places to help with readability. Bryce sent me a screenshot. He actually grabbed this probably. Let me... Well, can't find it. Anyway, there's this issue in paint mode. If you look at one of those like colorblind image effects that people use to like test what colorblind people would see in this, Bryce sent me an image of this where I don't remember what two colors, but yellow is one of them, and maybe green was the other one, and they both looked basically the same. The green was a little bit darker, but they were basically indistinguishable. And then the text above it was also yellow, like the yellow team had won, so the yellow text was against the yellow background, and there was no outline, and because everything was yellow, it was just really muddled and hard to read. So I changed, like I didn't make a new outline font, but I changed one of the default fonts to have an outline to it, and that made it more readable, and that's good. Readability is important. Making sure that people with disabilities could play your game is really important. Accessibility. I also saw this week, who is this? The Long Dark maybe added this feature that I had never heard of changing hold to confirm to be pressed to confirm as like an option that you could set in the menu. I'd never heard of a condition where holding down a button for a second or whatever was hard for certain people to do, people with certain disabilities. So I hadn't considered that, but now it's on my list of features to make sure get into the Steam build. I have a bunch of like additional features that that I'm not gonna have time to work on for Switch at launch, and will make it into like a patch, but that's definitely going to go into the Steam build where I'm doing that. Okay, next stuff. Coins now render in front of water instead of rendering before water, such that water is like in front. Coins have to be transparent because when a coin spawns, there's like a amount of time that they exist, and then after that time they start like blinking as though they're gonna pop out, and then they pop out. and that blink needs to like fade them, I think. Does it need to do that? Let me actually look in coins for a second, because I might, basically the point I'm making is coins are transparent and that causes like weird problems, including this one. Aquarium, coins. So that's kind of annoying. The bigger issue that I hate about coins is that if you look at them from the right angle, because the coin has a front side, like a coin is shaped like this obviously, but there's also a little circle in the center. And if you're looking from the side, you can see the inside of it because it's transparent. Couldn't you do the blink with a cutout shader? I could do it with a cutout, but I'm not sure if the fade is actually important to like the readability of the blink. That was the same thought that I had. So it is a fade, and it would look worse if it was a blink. So I'm just gonna leave it. Yeah, I could also do like a dithered transparency instead of, I think you could see it there, the issue I'm talking about. Yep, this is it right here. So this face is still the front side of the coin, but it's like competing with the front, with this side, which doesn't write to the Z buffer because it's transparent. So it's just like kind of annoying. Is this a specific shader? If I do a different rendering mode. Transparent's wrong. Fake school. Yeah, why the fuck is the... That one was behind it again. Thought I fixed this issue. Oh, look at that one. That one's fucked up too. How did I mess this up again? Okay, well, it looks like I need to make a card for that. I'm also realizing it would be nice to gameplay bugs. Coins still rendering behind aquarium water? Question mark. Also consider dither transparency for coins. Okay. Get rid of that. Okay, let's move on. I have a card for this now. I fix all the character mouth and eye blend shapes, and they're referenced, like specifically I changed how they're called in code because when I was doing, I showed this last week, when I was doing the effect of masking out characters' arms and tail when they're in a trash can, part of that tech or whatever requires that characters have like vertex painted, basically a vertex painted mask on their body that defines which parts of the body are allowed to be clipped by that tech. And when I was exporting all of those characters again, for whatever reason, who knows Maya, Maya flipped the indices of the blend shapes so that instead of being the eye blend first and then the mouth blend second, it flipped those, which flipped for every character where flipped with every character in dialogue whether their mouth was going to be moving to their talking or with their eyes. So every character was like blinking in sync with when they would be talking, and then their mouth would randomly, every some interval, would just like blink once, and it was very silly. It also is like, I kind of underestimate this, how much this adds, but it really makes the characters feel more alive and like more engaging when they actually like move their mouth and their eyes blink once in a while. That it's like actually really important to selling the character as like a living thing that has a, I don't know, has agency and like has thoughts outside of you. It's kind of weird. It makes them feel like characters instead of like floppy animals. Next thing, last hot dog quest. This is a really stupid one. My enum of quest quests. Hot dog is somewhere. Last hot dog. So in this enum, and I should give context, I use this enum all over the game to basically like load quests and like determine which quests have been used, and I look up the prefab that we want to use from this enum, and I match up this enum to the prefab by the name of like the string of the enum, which means that I fucked up the last hot dog quest, that I fucked up the capitalization of this prefab was like breaking the game in a really rare way, because this quest, the quests in Sausage Sports Club are randomly arranged in adventure mode, so it's not like every time I play there's not a place for me to go check, oh, is this quest working, is that quest working? It's just like randomly these quests all spawn, and if one of them isn't spawning because its fucking capitalization on its prefab is wrong, I wouldn't know, because it could just be like, you know, 1 in 26 is like kind of not likely that I would see it every day. So I didn't remember to check. I don't even remember how it came up that I found it. Maybe it was like an error. It was probably that Bryce was doing a check of all of the quests, like in my Sausage Soccer Prefs. When you do adventure mode, you can define like a specific quest override. My guess is that Bryce literally just went through all of these in order and got to the last hot dog quest, tried to play, there was an error that was like, this is fucked up, and then Bryce logged the error. That's probably how I found it, but that one like made me really mad and made me feel like my code base was really brittle, and like there were potentially a lot more kind of like prefab name related errors. So that was kind of scary. Let's see what's next. Bug where players were getting stuck, locked in place. That is a sentence. That one's pretty self-explanatory. During a quest, you enter a dialogue. When you finish the dialogue, sometimes players couldn't move. That was bad. And I think, let me look, read dialogue. Let's do lock on finish. The fuck? Lock on finish. Oh, it's the wrong type. Troop. I'm just trying to find where I use this. Here we go, okay. So in a quest, when I play dialogue, I want the player to be locked in place during the dialogue, and that's handled internally by this thing, move player to listen pose routine, which basically just moves all the players. If you're in co-op, it moves all 4 players to like predefined poses to listen to what the NPCs have to say, and then during that dialogue, you're locked. Like, you're always locked during dialogue for sure. And then once, this is a change I made recently to actually like use this thing correctly. I'm not sure why previously, but I was only locking players if this was set to true, but I wasn't unlocking them if it wasn't, which was the source of these bugs where you would get locked and it would be unintentional. So basically, unless I specifically said don't lock on finish, or am I explaining this? It would always lock, and unless I said unlock, then it didn't unlock the character, which meant every single use of play dialogue needed to say lock on finish is false. And if I forgot to add that argument, then it would not work. And this equals false wasn't here before. I think that's what happened. Regardless of like the detail, it's fixed now. There was also a kind of rare bug where NPCs would get stuck in the air during dialogue, and I think I fixed this now by more carefully waiting until the player is grounded before marking them kinematic, I guess. Where's that function? Sub-target? Sub-target? There we go. Yeah, so I wait until the player's X and Z positions match their target position, and then previously I wasn't doing as careful of a check here to check if they were grounded. I think I was just doing is grounded, which, without getting too much into the internals of how the characters work, this isn't checked every frame. It's only checked every couple of frames, or if it's like very important that it's correct. So like I can manually say check is grounded, that caches the value of whether it's really grounded right now or not. And if it's not, then we just keep waiting until our like optimized not happening every frame check of whether we're grounded succeeds, then we actually lock the player. So hopefully that should really fix that issue of characters getting stuck in the air. Fixes regression that caused sumo to never end. Bryce logged a bug a week ago or something that if you are a human player playing with bots in sumo and you have a bot on your team and you die a bunch of times and run out of lives, but then the other bot is like doing well and still living and the game goes on for a while, you can't pause it. You couldn't pause it while you were dead. You had to just wait for the bots to finish, and then you could, then the game would end and you could continue. So I tried to just do like a hack fix to make it so in sumo specifically, when you run out of lives, despite having your game object set active, I was adding that player back to the spawn players list, which is, has bad connotations. Just so that the pause checking function that iterates over all the spawn players could do that. And that was fucked because then in sumo, the check to end the game also looks at spawn players, that same spawn player list. So it was seeing that the dead players are still in the list, not ending the mode. Whoops, I broke the game. I made a much worse bug by trying to fix kind of a trivial, like, not super important to fix bug. And the real solution of this is, it's kind of a fucked up problem. So the underlying reason I can't fix this in a better way is because input gets checked on a component that lives on players, which means when a player dies, I can't, unless I have a list of like living and dead players or like all existing players, like I can't really check their input. And that's like a weird system to have like dead players and spawn players and then like iterate over both their lists, but that maybe that's like the real solution I could do without refactoring shit. But the ideal solution would be that player info, which is my kind of ethereal way of maintaining players in the game. Like a player info is basically an object that holds what input device I look at, what my name is, what my skin is, what my hat is, what my team is. I don't think I said that. Basically, like the stuff that makes up a character lives inside that data, and then that's kind of given to a player to direct its movement, or sorry, it's given to a player. A player has an input component on it, and that references the player info's input device, and like derives from that. The player input derives like how input is used, and like sends that off to players and player physics, and basically the state machine that runs the player's body looks at input and like gets did I hit the jump button, did I hit the dash button, instead of like looking at the actual input device to check which key or whatever. And really what should be happening is that player input should live with player info, so that should be like a nebulous thing, so that without a player existing in the scene, we still should be able to check like what what does this player think pause is with their rebind stuff? Let's get that button and check if that button was pressed for the pause menu. But right now, the player input is like coupled tightly with an actual like player in the world entity, and that's like kind of bad. Mauricio, I don't use action sets. I still use the profiles. I guess I shouldn't show in control code on stream. That wouldn't help you, that one. That one's like not really supported anymore. How can I show this? Player input. So I kind of made my own action sets, I guess you could say. Like here are the input types that I use in the game, and I map those to a manual. This is kind of gross to read. Control type. So like I mentioned before, the player save has on it like a dictionary of this thing to what in control sees as a button. So like I can tell, using the system, I can say a dash is represented by what in control says is the action 3 button or whatever. And rather than looking up in a dictionary, what in control type I get from the dash input, and then looking up from that in control what input that enum represents, I cache this into like the actual input control object for that input in here, so that rather than doing that dictionary lookup every time I need an input, I just do it once when I set up input. Player info on the right, yeah, it's that's really what I just need to move this to the player info instead of having it live on this manual input component. And it wouldn't be that hard to do it. I just don't want to really refactor this at this point. There's like bugs that could be created from that. But really, if I just took all of this shit and moved it to player info, that probably would be fine. But yeah, there's just like, but I don't want to make bugs. That's the kind of change that would make a lot of bugs. Yeah, I feel weird about player infos controlling menus because how do I explain this? It's harder for me to change like icons in the menu to represent arbitrary inputs on a controller. Like for me to show like move the left stick left to select, like if I rebind for whatever reason my like menu confirm button to be like move the left stick left, which is something you could do feasibly in my system, I don't want the menu to be controlled in that way. I want it to be more intuitive than that. Like if let's say like I'm an idiot, I change all my controls to be very bad, and then my friend comes over and they pick up the controller. First they're like, I want to play Sausage Sports Club. And they pick up the controller and they can't even navigate the menu to even change the rebind stuff. That's like something I don't want. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Like maybe somebody with a disability will like be rubbed the wrong way by the game because the menus are controlled not by the rebound inputs, but I just kind of got to get that complaint before I'll back off on that specific input change. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, better art for tetherball, pole, swing, and basketball hoop. Let me actually push this from my laptop so you can see what that looks like. why is it bigger? I can bring my laptop over there. I'm not just off screen. I'm back. Okay, let me pull this. Do you do input rebinds? Or I guess the action set would let you do that pretty easily. Pull. I think it's likely that the light maps are going to look weird because my laptop is on a slightly different version. It's on a different patch revision. And Unity, for whatever reason, like really loves to change light map version numbers every patch, every single time. And whether that's an actual like real fix or not is unclear. Okay, so this is pushing now, so I will pull that. I'm pretty salty because the 50 megabytes I got back from deleting all the normal maps and like shrinking those down, I just got in my light map increasing in size by 50 megabytes. So that sucks. I guess I could tweak the settings of lighting more. Why is the padding so high? It seems so big. Oh, this is the wrong map. Still waiting on the, you can't see it, but I'm still waiting on the upload to finish of the light map so that I can do that stuff. Fuck this stuff. Oh boy. Okay. God, it's still going. Okay, let's keep going. I'll come back to the light map thing, I guess. It's not really important that you see this new art. It's just like material and not shit looking model. Fixes some quest typos. That one's self-explanatory. I added, this wasn't a bug, I added a low % chance for bots when they spawn to be spawned with a random hat, which doesn't sound like much, but it actually like makes it feel like the bots have a lot more charm and character. And like, let's say I add 6 random bots to play with, the one that has the hat is my best friend and the other ones aren't. That's just like a given. So, and you could also potentially like do a roulette thing where like until you get all of the bots that have hats, you just like you start a game, see which ones have hats, remove the ones that don't, start another game, wait till they all have hats, and then play with that group. I think that would be funny. It's kind of stupid though. There's currently there's also no way to have a bot and then assign them a hat, and that's like kind of a UX problem. Instruction pane to show Switch players how to switch between dual and single Joy-Con. Let's see that menu. That's kind of an interesting problem. Sure thing. I actually found it pretty straightforward to implement it. So if I would suggest taking maybe an hour to just try to like diagram out what the data would look like in your game to do that. It might be easier than you expect. What was I doing? I forget. Construction pane. Okay, that's the wrong menu. Player select. So this is it. I literally just added this text label, and it only shows up on Switch, and hopefully that's enough information for people to figure it out. How is it still uploading? It's only 300 megabytes. Okay, so that's a thing. If you're not familiar on Switch, the paradigm of changing, like if I want to play, if there's a game where you can play either like this or like this, the paradigm generally for switching between those is to, let me hold it like this, is to pull down both of the trigger buttons. Either, generally it's the bumpers, I guess, but the triggers also work for this, I think. And if you want to do for a single one, then you click the buttons on the top, which also have L and R on them. So I'm kind of making a bet that players, I know they're smart enough to figure this out if that text is there, but I'm kind of making a bet that there's a good chance they've also had experience if they're playing a game like this on Switch, that they'll know that L and R is like how you switch to single Joy-Con. Okay. Mode select text. This is stupid, but I think it's actually been like 6 or more months since I had this idea and finally just got to it. Open Zazu Soccer Breaths. What the fuck? Here we go. Let's do museum. Bring a mode select. I don't know why I need to load this. Finally finished. Let's start downloading. This is actually weird that I'm pulling this and also Unity's open and like trying to play. Probably gonna crash or something. Okay. Basically just when you enter mode select, which is kind of a weird mode because it's in a 3D space and you have to like move in a 3D space to select the mode you want to play. I just like drop in text along the top here. Or don't. Did I just miss it? Anyway, I probably have to fix that, but now there's like a piece of text, you can't see my hand, piece of text that just like drops down, says mode select, and then goes back up, and that menu is like a weird sticking point for people when they play the game, because they get there and they're like, oh, are we playing already? What's going on? How do I win? And they're still choosing a mode. So just having that little prompt, I think, is going to be really useful to have people understand how to play. Next, regression. Yeah, this is like in the overworld. There's these 3D widgets, or I should say, text mesh. They like exist in the 3D world rather than being on a 2D plane that's overlaid. But they rendered behind 3D objects instead of just like always being overlaid above them. And so I had to fix that. Co-op. Oh, I made it so players, previously when you would enter a dialogue, your like main player, the controlling player, would get into position to listen to dialogue, and then once that routine finished of them getting into place, all the other ones, whether or not they were in the correct place, like they were all trying to get to the place they were supposed to be. Once player one got where they were supposed to be, then everybody else just kind of like stopped where they were. That was kind of weird. Now they actually all will finish for sure where they're going. And I think I should probably make it so the dialogue can start before other players besides player one get into place, but for now it's everybody has to get into place. I think I might have mentioned this, but when I made that switch to the save data to switch the lists and dictionaries to ints, that created some weird problems of How do I explain this? I would because these are now ints coming out and I needed to get them into enum form before I could use them for stuff. Often I was just like casting to an enum without doing a null check to see if there was actual data coming out of the dictionary, and that was bad. Whereas previously when they were enums, I get like, even if it was nothing, I could at least assume that it was the enum name .none, which the enums I was working with had those generally. And the last one, and this I don't know why this took me so long to figure out, but I fixed an issue on Switch where inputs didn't transfer when switching from handheld to tabletop mode. So when you're playing handheld and you take the controllers off, you want to keep being able to play with the same character without having to go back to the menu. And also, to go back to the menu, you would have, in that, like previously, you would have had to reattach to the dock or to the Switch, go back to the menu, take off the controllers, or sorry, first you have to unsign out your character, then you have to take the controllers off, then you sign in a character and you can play. Super dumb. Especially when I know that if I take the controllers off the thing, I know in that moment that suddenly a player has been deregistered, an input device has been deregistered. And so I know there's now an open slot for this new set of controllers that I've just created by detaching to like replace the other one. So that was just like, kind of like a brain fart. I can't show this code because it's both based on InControl and it also like interfaces with the Switch API, so I can't show the code. But basically, I do this kind of complicated check to see if last frame if I was in handheld mode and this frame if I'm now not in handheld mode. I want to go through. I want to find the controller that isn't what like was the handheld controller and detach it, and then find the new controller that has now been added since it's been converted from handheld and attach that device. And previously I wasn't necessarily doing that in order, which meant I could attach the new device before I detached the handheld, which meant in the callback in my code that I get to like repair the missing player, I could, like if I got the attach of the new controller first, there wasn't an open slot yet for me to like mash that new input device into. So it was just like a weird order of operations thing that I had to fix, and now it just works. It's good. So that's like pretty much all the bugs. I left out a few that are like duplicate-ish or not interesting. I still have a lot of bugs in my Trello to fix, so I got to get to that. And I'll do that on stream. Like I'm gonna do a work session. For a little bit of context about what's left for the game before it ships, obviously I have to fix a million bugs forever. I mentioned already that I want to optimize the overworld on Switch more than it is right now. Currently the bottleneck I'm running into is just like straight up poly count, I think. Obviously like memory I mentioned and talked about a little bit. I'm like at 2 gigs and I need to not be. Let's see how the light bake worked out this time. Yep, just what I expected. So between this version and the other patch version that I built light maps on, something happened to these rocks. I think, or wait, no, these are like a real model, huh? Well, I don't know what that problem is, but on my other computer, which is on a more recent version of Unity that's been patched already, those rocks look fine. So when I send the next Logic build in Nintendo, I'll have to do it from that laptop, I guess. So that is marked for static and it's baked. Looks better. This is the tetherball pull I was talking about before. Previously, this was just like a cylinder primitive in the ground, so it was all just white and it just looked kind of like shabby. It still maybe looks a little bit shabby, but it's definitely better. Here's the swing set. I think this could still look better too, but it looks a lot better than it did. It's just like primitive bullshit. That looks a little bit weird, but you can never see that, I don't think. Maybe you can. I think the camera for this section's like right here, so probably worth fixing that little spot. Anything else new? Oh, you can see the trees don't have that black final gather issue I was mentioning. And this was like mostly on the leaves, but it also affected the tree trunk and just made them all look very bad. So the jungle looks a lot better now. It's especially noticeable in the like lower, what do you call it? The lower light map levels. Because it would, like, there's obviously still a pop. Like, look at this tree. Yeah, there's obviously still a pop, but previously the pop was like a way, like the lowest level or the highest level detail was like way darker and it looked very bad. That one looks kind of bad. I don't think there's anything I can do about that though. It's fine. Okay, cool. Whoop. So bug fixes forever, optimize overworld. Yeah, at some angles of view, like if I go all the way up here and I can see everything in the damn game, the poly count is pretty stupid. I think it's like 1 million. That's not gonna fly for Switch, no way. Game stats. So it's close to 1 million. I want to see like if I'm close to the forest enough. What would it be here? Okay, so it's still pretty high. This is because it's high right here because the trees at this distance are actually like fully modeled in because I'm stupid. This is a weird. So there's two like performance bottlenecks of the jungle, and they're both kind of competing. One is that if I'm very close in the jungle, and there's like this shot specifically, a lot of the pixels on the screen, there's like, for one given pixel, let's say this pixel right here that my mouse is on, there's like 5 trees overlapping. Now let's do this one. There's like, here there's like maybe 7 trees overlapping. And if these trees were transparent and not cut out, that would be, you know, 7 overdraw pixels right there. And so that's like one type of bottleneck. My solution to that, instead of doing cutout for some reason, is to make this tree just be like modeled in all the detail. This mesh is like fully, the gaps here are like real gaps. It's not transparent, so it's opaque. But the problem that creates is the jungle then with, how many polys are in this thing? In Palm. 2,000, that's a lot. Fuck. So there's 2,000 in each of these trees, and then there's a lot of trees, so the poly count is pretty high in the forest. Which on Switch is another bottleneck. It's like a similar bottleneck to like the 7 transparency thing. So I made this big change, implemented LEDs to like swap in a lower res or a lower mesh density version. So like when I'm far away, I don't really have the issue of like so much overdraw, and I don't really have the issue of high poly count. But once I get close, it really is like a big issue. So that's the jungle. That's like one big performance issue. If I look over here, there's also just like kind of a lot of stuff going on. Where is, that's not where I want to be. I haven't actually done this for this viewpoint. I think there's a lot of stuff here too. So there's like 500,000. Some of that is these guys. Just like 1,000 tries per thing almost. Just a bunch of them, and they're all the plant shader, which is, I believe it's transparent cutout. Alpha test. I think that's like the same as transparent cutout. Yeah, right? Is that right? What if you just didn't? Come on. There we go. Alpha test is rendered before transparent. I think that's what cutout uses. Pretty sure. That same cube. Okay. So that's like kind of where I'm at for optimization. Like, I'm gonna swap in more LODs. Like, these things should definitely have LODs. I'm going to, when I'm not in this zone, a lot of this stuff, I don't know how high poly this drum kick is, but like a lot of this stuff could just not be there. Oh, this is actually like kind of high poly. I wasn't expecting that. It's not that high poly. Guitar's probably similar. It's not bad. A few thousand. So there's like LOD work to do. Yeah, that sounds right, Mauricio. So we're trying to do the aquarium's in pretty good shape. I think this is like 5,000 polys in this wall. This one's like 3,000 maybe. So that's not like crazy huge. This one, it's kind of a lot in these cars. Yeah. So with this view, that's like 20,000 just in cars. So maybe I should try to reduce that. How bad does cutout look for the trees? Cutout doesn't look bad. It's not even noticeably different. But I also don't get performance back. So it's like kind of not worth it, maybe. I'll make a card to like actually like triple check. I know I've done this before. But what I'll try is I'll use the lower. Is that the lowest? I don't want to use the lowest. I'll use the medium one, which is maybe like 200 or 300 polys. What? What the fuck? How is that 1,000 tries? I'm like bewildered by this being so many tries. How much is each one of these? Two, maybe like 50 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 times 50 is 500 plus 8. Okay, 800. I guess that makes sense. That's wild. I thought it was so much lower than that. Maybe I'll try it with like a very low poly one. See how that feels. I'm gonna make sure to undo all my changes here to the overworld. Unfortunately, optimization is not something I can really effectively work on stream, because making builds is like CPU heavy, and I don't want to be like using my CPU to do streaming and also doing builds, because it's just gonna make me work slower. I like that on LOD1, you said? Take no coal. Plant no coal. This one's also doing that. Why is that not opaque? I think I'm incurring both costs right now. What the fuck? That's what it should be. That's weird. I guess I'll have to make a build. Here's what I'll do. I'll make a build for my computer and just let it kind of run. See how that goes. For my laptop, I should say. That might just fix the jungle. Like, not having these trees give me the like high poly count thing, and also giving me the overdraw. Those are alpha corral, so like that shouldn't really matter. Yeah, I do remember like purposely making it like that on the lower LOD. While I'm at it, I'm also going to do the same on the big. Bring my computer back over. Okay. So it looks like the fat palm tree in the overworld here. This one, it looks like the highest level is doing, has 2 materials on it. Actually, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I'm just gonna make a build then. This will probably take a million billion years. Give me ROM. Okay. Cool, so I'll kick that off and then see what happens. I forgot that I can actually do like builds now, because I can do that on the laptop while I'm streaming from this machine. Okay, so fucking I went off on such a crazy tangent there for optimization. Other stuff that's less, I'd like to add more toys to the overworld. This is something you gave me feedback on, Mauricio, is that there just like should be more shit to interact with. And that's always been what I wanted. That's like the pitch for the overworld, is that it's filled with toys and stuff. There's a good amount of toys right now, but like per biome, it's kind of like weirdly, the numbers are like weird. Right now, the Hollywood biome has the most toys, and then maybe like the junkyard has the next most toys, and then the jungle has a few. Like the vent is like a pretty fun toy, and the jangly bridge is like decent. Then aquarium only has 2 or 3 if you count the bongos. But I just had to keep those. Just gotta add more. That's the idea. Add more of those. Finale tweaks. There's still some like weird dialogue in the finale where like characters aren't properly addressed as like the character that they are, and I haven't done a passive localization to make sure that all that stuff works right. So it definitely doesn't work right. And then just developer commentary is like, that's really it. That matches what I see on my board over here. Ooh, I can rip off a card. Fix switch showstoppers. That's done. I'll have to make another card that says the same thing on it after a lot check, but okay. So it's building. Cool. And the developer commentary stuff is really just like I record into my mic just like I'm doing right now, and then the harder part is like coming up with an interesting anecdote from the game and having enough of those. I would like to do like 20 or 30. I've got maybe 10 right now, a little under 10. So okay, cool. So now I'm gonna end it for a second and then come right back just so that the like actual like the actual, what do you call it, the weekly update is like in one recording on Twitch, so it's easier for me to export. So I'll just be right back. But this is the end. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. If you aren't already following the channel, do that so that you get a notification when I start. And thanks for coming. We'll be right back.